Welcome to the Krug Show on a beautiful Northern California Thursday, June the 1st. Down in 49er land earlier today, made it back in time for the live stream with the great Vish Kumaran. Hope everybody's enjoying their Thursday. We are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. Join me at Pig and a Pickle any day of the week in Marin County. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they're also open in Emeryville Wednesday through Sunday. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Vish, good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, Krug. How are you? You're the one that's getting to go to practice and seeing what's going on and being a part of what's going on in Ninerland.
Well, it's funny. I had a conversation today. We had a chance to talk to each of the individual assistant coaches today. The Niners are really guarded about their assistant coaches in season, but they, here we are in the off season. They take one day and they've trot out all their assistant coaches and they make them available for a period of time. And so I had a chance to talk to Johnny Holland, to Daniel Bullocks, to Fleury, the tight end coach, to
Greasy,
to Brian Greasy, and one of the very first, actually was the last conversation I had of the day, and the last question I asked him, I said, "There's an awful lot of controversy about Brock Purdy's arm strength." I said, "In my opinion, you either have requisite arm strength and you can make all the throws, or you have what we would call below requisite arm strength and you struggle to make all the throws." And I said, where does Brock sit in your, in your quarterbacks as far as not with the guys they have on the roster, but just quarterbacks he's ever seen as far as arm strength? And he's like, it's a non-issue. It's a total non-issue. He's got more than enough arm strength to make all the throws that he needs to make in this offense. And while other people may debate it externally, he made it perfectly clear. We debate a lot of things internally, but that's not one of them. So, you could say it's the company line, or you could say that's just him being totally frank and direct and honest with his appraisal. But at least publicly, in the eyes of Brian Greasy, this arm strength debate that Brock has, and of course, granted, this is all pre-elbow. I didn't ask him what he looked like in the last 48 hours.
right?
But as far as Brian Greasy's concerned, arm strength and Brock Purdy, it's a non-story. They feel like he has plenty of arm strength and can make all the throws. Does that do anything to your opinion or your thought process on a topic that has been openly debated most of this offseason, the arm strength of Purdy, either after the surgery or really even before?
No.
Doesn't change anything.
I didn't have an issue with his arm strength before. I didn't participate in that debate.
Right. You really did.
His arm is, in fact, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the fact that his arm felt more closer to NFL average than it felt weak over the course of last year. I expected his arm to be weak, Larry. I really did. It was weak when you watched him at Iowa State. His arm, when he played last year in the NFL, was 100%, about average NFL arm strength. I didn't, find there to be a real palpable difference between his arm strength versus Jimmy Garoppolo's. I think Garoppolo does maybe generate a little more RPMs off of more unique platforms, but otherwise, when they're both, just ripping it from a clean pocket, I don't know if there's a large difference there. And one of the first things I said when I watched him in that Miami game is when you compared his arm next to Tua's arm, watching them side by side, drive after drive, right? You were able to see that he had the stronger arm than Tua. Now, Tua has probably the weakest arm of any starting quarterback in the NFL, but I didn't look. There's a lot of debates about Brock Purdy, I think, that are to be had. The arm strength one, I guess you would prefer a quarterback to have a stronger arm, but I don't think lack of arm strength is going to, at least as of what we saw last year, I don't think lack of arm strength is going to be the reason why Brock Purdy fails, right? Like if Brock Purdy fails, we're not going to say because his arm was like Christian Ponder, that's why he failed. No, there's a plethora of reasons we can talk about and point to, but I'm not going to sit here and expect that reason to be, oh, dude, he just didn't have NFL arm strength. No, he has an average NFL arm. It's fine. It's whatever.
Well, let me, you piqued my curiosity with that answer. So if I said to you, Brock Purdy's future in the NFL, what is an issue that if Brock Purdy fails, what will be the reason in your mind?
He got too comfortable playing outside of structure. Got way too comfortable with it, started running out of the pocket too much, got too enamored with his own playmaking, and got away and never got back to playing just, hey, whatever's there, taking advantage of it. I thought he left some plays on the field a lot last year. And he talked about this too. If you notice, one of the first things he said, and I love how introspective he is, Larry, in all of these pressers. He mentioned how he wants to maximize the play that's there and not get too enamored with his confidence in his playmaking, because he has a ton of confidence in that. And so if I think he fails, it's because I don't think he's built to play this play style where if he's not constantly delivering on time and on schedule, yes, he has this playmaking about him, but I don't think his game, his body, everything is built for him to last 17 games in the NFL playing that much freelance and off schedule football. So if he failed, I think that's what I would point to. I'd be like, hey, that's why he failed. Not because, hey, his arm could, sure, Larry, like there's no doubt I would prefer for his arm to be stronger, but I don't think his arm being stronger, not being strong enough is a question. It's plenty strong to be able to operate this offense just fine.
That's what I saw as well. But I do understand the people that, because I'm trying to understand where people are coming from. And I think there's just a concern among some portion of the Niner audience that in a league that does have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and some guys who throw the ball exceptionally well, Josh Allen, guys who are 6'6", 220, 230, that maybe the stature, whether we're talking about arm strength or not, just the stature of Purdy isn't good enough to compete for Super Bowls in a league that has quarterbacks that have, bigger stature, bigger physical profiles. What would you say to those who say, you know what, I like Brock Purdy and I really like everything he's done, but I'm really concerned because I see this league as having a number of Patrick Mahomes type stature guys that are big physical guys who can make incredible plays with their arm, and in some cases incredible plays with their legs. If you want to talk about Josh Allen, I mean he's really the total package in a lot of ways,
right.
And that the overall skill set of a Brock is not on that level. And I want my Niners to be able to contend for Super Bowls. And I don't know that they can in a league that has those kinds of quarterbacks while you have this kind of a quarterback.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that argument. One, I hate when we reduce just talking about those guys and we just talk about their arm strength. I think there's an ability that they have to throw the ball that just goes beyond their arm strength. Like, not every quarterback with a strong arm has their gifts, the Herberts, the Mahomes. We're talking about, like Larry, if we start ranking some of the greatest, like just pure throwers in NFL history, Mahomes is right in there with Rodgers and Marino and Elway. And Allen's probably somewhere up there on that list too. And, somebody like Justin Herbert's probably not too far off from the top of that list as well. There's Brady who'll be somewhere near the top. So, like, they're generational talents in terms of how they throw the football, right? And then you have Burrow, who doesn't have maybe the same arm power as them, but his accuracy and ball placement is scary, unbelievable. He's also an unbelievable passer and thrower. And so I think that ideally you would like to have one of that's hilarious. I think ideally you would like to have one of those guys, Larry. There's no doubt you would. But if you don't have one of them, you have to deal with what you have. And, like, I do understand the line of thinking that you might think Brock Purdy might not be able to compete with them. But if he's your best possible option, then it's kind of what you're stuck with. The only way to compete with one of them is by finding one of them. But it's not easy to find Patrick Mahomes. It's not easy to find Josh Allen. If it was easy, the Niners would have their version of him too.
My take on this whole quarterback stature thing is that there's no doubt in my mind that you have to have special traits to be a big time winner in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Special traits. But this is where me and other people part ways, is that I see special traits in Brock Purdy. They may not be height or, the highest level arm strength in the entire league. But to me, I see special traits of competitiveness, intellect, football IQ, touch, timing, courage. I see special traits. And if you think about it, the NFL has had a lot of different body types win. Russell Wilson has won a championship. He's 5'11". Drew Brees has won a championship. He's 6 feet. Steve Young has won a championship. He's probably under 6'1". You look at it's like every guy who wins. I mean, Jalen Hurts almost won a championship this year. Jalen Hurts is not a particularly big person, but there are special traits to Jalen Hurts, and there's a seriousness and a intellect and a resourcefulness and a movement ability that is high level.
The running is also special, right? He's got like 25 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years. That's unheard of.
Even beyond the running, I'll just say even greater than that. If you do your homework on Jalen Hurts, and I know you have, the leg strength that he possesses is clearly special. I mean, he's on a totally different level than a lot of quarterbacks. So do you need to be an outlier to win in the NFL? Yeah, you really do. But you don't necessarily. I was watching the Joe Montana Peacock documentary, the first episode, and going back to Joe, it's like Joe was, I think, in a lot of ways like Brock, from the standpoint of he was a great athlete that people didn't necessarily see as a great athlete until after he had already won. Like, Joe was skinny, but Joe also could dunk in high school and was a great incredible basketball player, incredible football player, but he had athletic gifts of quickness and jumping ability and lower body explosion that nobody saw.
Right.
And we're hearing about it afterwards, but I didn't see that.
I think that's some of the David versus Goliath obsession with the media and romanticizing that particular story, right? And they love creating a Rudy atmosphere with football players where it's like, see, he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest. And then, like, for example, right, they love the Jerry Rice 4.7 40 story, right? But then you watch Jerry Rice on the football field and he's outrunning angles of guys who, probably ran 4.4 at the combine. And it's like the 4.7 always has this tag with Jerry Rice that he's not fast. But really on the football field, he was incredibly fast. Nobody could catch him. So he was really fast. And so I know exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, I heard Sean Payton talking about it this year when he used to talk about Drew Brees, right? Drew Brees is a phenomenal athlete at his size. Drew Brees could dunk a basketball, apparently, at 6 feet. But just because, Drew Brees was smaller in stature, we don't like to think about him as having special physical gifts as well. I totally understand what you're talking about. It's just the media. They love telling that story. With Brady, how many years have we told the story with Brady without realizing the fact that he was drafted out of high school in the MLB to play catcher? And he's got an absolute howitzer for an arm. And there's a reason why he threw the ball without having an issue in Foxborough for 19 years in the playoffs in the snow, and he could rip it through the snow because he's got a great arm. But like when we talk about top arms, all of that, Brady, we don't, for whatever reason, ever talk about. Did you see what he was doing last year at like 45? He was still throwing strikes.
No doubt.
It's just that story, man. They like that story.
Well, it to me, I'm going to bring up a guy that I know you never watched, but I know you know all about because you are there in Chicago. If I say the greatest running back we ever saw, potentially, now everybody can debate it. Some people will say it's Emmett. Other people will say it's Jim Brown. Some people say it's Barry Sanders. To me, the greatest running back I've ever seen was 5'10" and 200 pounds. He wasn't 240. He wasn't, but Walter Payton. Walter Payton was 5'10" and 200 pounds. And if we were looking for I need some special profile, Walter Payton, I would say pound for pound was as strong a back as I've ever seen. He might be as pound for pound the strongest player I've ever seen. There was one guy that reminded me of Walter Payton as far as pound for pound strength watching him, and that was Terrell Davis, who I know you've seen a lot of. But they had a lot of the same things. It's like Terrell Davis was pound for pound amazingly strong, and just guys fell off of him. But Walter Payton was 5'10", 200 pounds, and that's totally ordinary dimensions. But he arguably the greatest running back who ever played.
Did you see Steve M's comment over there?
No. What did Steve say?
He said, looks like they're working. Damn. No, he said, damn, they're working at Best Buy now because you and I got the matching. That's great.
Yes. That is awesome. Yeah, here it is. Steve M. Yes. Can I help you, sir? Yes, I'm looking for a certain DVD. DVD. What's a DVD? Oh, yeah, we still have those. They're in aisle 17, right behind the baby monitors.
You really went to Best Buy and asked about DVDs, Crew?
No. Okay. No, I don't go to Best Buy that much, but there is one just down the street from me. Okay. And it's always amazing how many people are walking around Best Buy, and they, I'll be standing there waiting and I'm the guy who has lots of questions. I need help at Best Buy. Finally, somebody will come up and be like, "Hey, you look like you need help." I'm like, "Yes, I do. Thank you, blue shirt. Thank you for seeing my play."
That's us now. Look at that.
That's us. Yes. You're the manager, and I'm just today's my first day.
Let me ask you this though, because while we're on this conversation, right? Because you did bring it up to talk about Purdy before we got sidetracked,
right?
So you think, in your opinion, and to be fair, you've been seeing this from before he even played the 8 games. You think Purdy does have a unique, just as we talked about with those other great players, you think there's a unique eliteness about Purdy too?
A unique what about Purdy?
You think there's unique qualities that are elite about him that make him elite too, just as we talked about with Breeze, right? With Breeze, it was that he was the technical expert. He played the position as perfect as you could play it. Also a very good athlete, very accurate player, right? And like that, you similarly, just what are the things that made each one of these individual guys great? They had a few things they were elite at. You think Purdy has a few things just like that are elite about him?
I do. Like I think he's an elite competitor, and I can recognize that personality type. It takes me back to the first interview that I did with him. I did an interview with him, and at the tail end of the interview, a young lady, and I forget who it was, a media person came up and was standing right there, and her first question, so I was done. I shook hands with them. "Thanks, Brock. Appreciate your time, man." And I was just maybe walked 2 steps to the right. This other woman walked over, and she's like, "You were Mr. Irrelevant." Okay, this is early on in his 49er tenure. And I looked over at him, and he kind of shot me a glance, and it was like, the guy's a good guy, and he's a rookie on a new team, and he doesn't want to get mad, but he's disgusted by that question. You know what I mean? Some guys would be like, yeah, and like kind of, and he played along. "Oh yeah, shucks, just glad for an opportunity." He said all the right things. Wasn't rude to her at all. But there was a look on his face like, "You got to be freaking kidding me. I'm so much more than that." And it's just like, I recognized it as kind of disgust, but he didn't want to be rude to her. And he knew that she wasn't trying to be rude to him. So he just wore it and gracefully, answered the question and moved on. But I could see this burning, seething kind of like beneath the surface. You know what? That's not my standard. That's some designation that is attached to the final pick of the draft. I didn't want to be that. I never asked for this. And it's like, it's not embarrassing because I didn't do anything wrong, but it's also not me. And it's like he didn't want to be defined by it. And you could just see that this guy had an expectation for himself that far exceeded getting drafted and far exceeded the idea of Mr. Irrelevant. And he was polite and nice about it, but you could see the competitor. He kind of showed himself right there. And I remember looking at him going, you know what? This guy is on a trajectory that's far greater than Mr. Irrelevant, and people are going to soon know. And to me, I see a lot of the same traits that I saw in Tom Brady when I interviewed Tom Brady coming out of at the East West Shrine practices in the '99 lead up to that draft. You know, Tom Brady was like very humble, but how can you be both humble and extremely cocky at the same time?
Yeah,
I don't know, but Tom Brady is, and so's Brock Purdy.
It's a special innate self-belief, right? And I do think, look, I'm not ready to go to the same place that you just went. I'm
not saying he's Tom Brady. I'm saying
no,
personality-wise, I recognize those similarities.
Hey, I see bang on for sure. I think he has traits that project to him being elite. Frankly, Larry, I don't know. I'm waiting to find out a little bit with him. I'm open to the idea. We'll see. I'm willing to find out. I'm not one of these people that has closed the door on what his ceiling might be. I'm pretty much just wait and see on what's going to happen with his career. But I do think what has not been credited enough to him, Larry, is just how he's handled himself in that moment. You know, being 23 years old, the same age as me. So I guess I can identify with it a little bit just from a life perspective standpoint of being all of a sudden thrust into, you know, getting handed the keys to the world's greatest car, but you got to make sure you drive that car to the location. And he not only drove the car to the location, he sped the car to the location, right? And there was a lot of pressure that came with that. And I thought it was incredible that throughout all of that pressure, it felt like he never lost his poise, right? There was never a fish out of water moment that you see often for rookies. And you totally understand it because sometimes the moment can just get too big for them. It's not that they're mentally weak or anything like that. It's just that at that point, they aren't mentally mature enough to handle the pressures that come with that moment. That never happened to Brock Purdy. And I think there is something to be said to that because there's a lot of really good quarterbacks that we've seen lose their poise just because the pressure of the moment gets to them. And there is a quality to Purdy that is, I don't want to say Brady-esque. It's just Brady-esque in the sense that he seems to always have his poise. And I do think the important thing in that conversation is I think there was an article written by Matt Barrows. I want to say it was Barrows. That might have been one of the Athletic guys. So it could have been Lombardi, maybe Marcus Thompson. But it was one of these people. And it was an excellent article about Brock Purdy. And he knows who he is because he's gone through something in life that gave him that perspective, right? And in college, apparently his dad's business started to fail and his family started to lose some money.
Right.
And that affected their situation financially. And in that moment, Brock Purdy understood, hey, family and football are the two things that are most important to me. And I think the fact that he's gone through that, the fact that he knows who he is, he knows how to handle adversity. I do think there's a lot of credit that needs to be attributed towards that. Now, does that project to him being a great starting quarterback? We'll find out, Larry. That's for his career to eventually tell us that. But in terms of just a player that seems to have unlimited poise, he seems to have that. And I do think there hasn't been enough credit given to simply the fact, like, I understand how easy the situation was, Larry, because it was in a lot of ways very easy, but I've seen Jimmy Garoppolo, lose his poise in moments, and he's a veteran player. It's just the moment feels like it gets too big for him. A couple of hits, a little bit of pressure, he starts getting rattled. And Purdy never got rattled, and I think that's a special quality to him, and we'll find out if that turns him into an all-time great quarterback.
Frankie HB Super Chat says, what special qualities do you see in Brock Purdy that you don't see in Trey Lance and vice versa? I don't know that it has to be a vice. I realize they are competing for a job, but I'm not trying to be evasive. I'm just saying it's not like these, two guys can't have the same traits. What I see with Purdy is the same thing that I saw with Tom Brady and a little bit with like a Derek Jeter. It's like this belief that supersedes any of our opinions. Like an unshakable belief that that I'm good enough. And I would say comfort in their own skin. I mean, this Brock Purdy's really comfortable. As far as it's not that I don't see that in Trey. I just see a guy in Brock that has played a lot of football, and so you're not going to be able to like fool him or surprise him. And then also, I think Brock has tremendous faith. I think when you talk to him, it almost you can't. I mean, I don't like to get religious and this and that because everybody's got a different religion or maybe no religion at all. But sometimes when you see people that have such strong faith that they're somehow not affected by the noise around them, and I just think Brock in some ways is like he badly wants to be a pro football player, but if you talk to him for a few minutes, you can quickly understand that it doesn't define him. It's like if he's going to give it everything he's got, but it doesn't define him. He feels like, he is a son and a brother and whatever. I mean, all the other titles that you can potentially have in life in relation to your family. It seems like he's very grounded and serious. As far as Trey, I actually kind of think Trey is a guy that has unbelievable character. I just think that Trey's character is it gets no higher than that. I think his character is high level. I don't think he has the same belief that Brock has in his play because he hasn't played enough. But I think he hasn't played enough and experienced enough to. I mean, Trey Lance, I don't think has trailed in more than one college game or something like that in the second half. So he hasn't played the same he hasn't faced as much adversity at North Dakota State, which is kind of like the Yankees of the FCS compared to Iowa State in the Big 12. They're not Nebraska. They're not Oklahoma. They're not a powerhouse program.
Nebraska. You mean
Nebraska's now in the Big 10.
State?
But I'm just saying, I'm thinking of the big 8, which is what it used to be. Now the Big 12 and the powerhouses. Nebraska's obviously not in there anymore. But you know what I'm saying? They're not. Iowa State's not like the team, but North Dakota State is kind of like the Bama.
They're the Alabama of the FCS.
FCS, and the same way that like Mac Jones. I think Trey and Mac Jones were more similar in that they both started 17 college games and they both played on dominant teams where they were expected to win. And I think that there's something that comes along with that, knowing that everybody at the game expects you to win. There's pressure that comes with that. I think that reminds me of Mac, but I think Brock has kind of proven at a lower level that he can elevate an Iowa State to a Fiesta Bowl. I
mean, Lance did elevate them, right? They didn't win the national championship the year before he started, so.
But they're a dominant team, and they're still a dominant team, right?
I
think.
But as far as actually, they might have won it. I don't know. They might have won it.
Didn't they win with Wentz?
They won with Wentz twice, and Wentz got hurt in both of those years.
But I mean, I don't like to compare the guys on this front, but I would say I see special qualities in both. I see a football intellect with Brock because of all the games that he played, where I feel like he could coach the position. Where with Trey, what I see is a character, a high character guy who is not looking for shortcuts. He's not looking for anything to be handed to him. I think they're both extremely accountable. And then also they're good people. I think Brock is a good person. I think Trey's a good person. So I think that they're really similar from their character standpoint, but totally different from their experiences at quarterback standpoint.
I don't know if this is necessarily that deep. I do think there's one specific difference that I've seen from Brock Purdy, and I don't think it's exactly a fair statement to make as a resounding one. It's just based on what we've seen of 8 games of Purdy versus 4 games of Lance. I find Purdy to be a little bit more confident and have a little less hesitancy to his game. Now, I don't think it's exactly fair to label Trey Lance as not confident or hesitant or anything like that. He's not done anything to deserve that. But if you're asking me for what's the difference between the two, and it could be as simple as maybe Christian McCaffrey gave Brock Purdy that confidence. Sure, possible. Jimmy Garoppolo gained a lot of confidence from Christian McCaffrey. So definitely possible. There's a lot of different variables you could throw in here. But I found Brock Purdy to be a little bit more confident than Trey Lance. And even when they talk to the media and all that, I find him to be a little bit more confident than Trey Lance. Again, what does that confidence do to them being great quarterbacks, or what ends up happening in their careers, Larry? I have no clue. We're about to find that out. But just in terms of that one trait, right, just like we touched on it in the previous segment, his confidence is something you can feel. You can feel it. He's very confident. Now, I'm not saying just because he's very confident or just because I feel like he's more confident than Trey right now, it's always going to remain that way, or that means he's going to be a better quarterback or all of that. Who knows? We're about to find that out. But if we're contrasting the two based on the 8 games of Purdy we've been able to see and the 4 games of Lance we've been able to see, he doesn't hesitate and he plays a little bit more confidently.
I'll say the other thing that it reminds me, I think they're very similar. Both these guys are incredibly courageous within the pocket.
Yeah, they're tough as hell.
Neither guy is staring down the rush. Neither guy is, oh my God, I got to get rid of it. I can't take this hit. I think Trey Lance I don't think has one time flinched in the pocket in practice or in any of these games. And I see tons of quarterbacks who flinch all the time. He also doesn't stare down the rush. He doesn't get rid of it like, I got to get rid of this. I can't take this hit. I think both these guys maybe even are courageous beyond what the coaches would want. Like almost like they don't maybe have appropriate fear of the danger that is coming if you take hits in the NFL.
Shanahan always says you need that to play quarterback. So there's a reason he drafted one of those guys 3rd overall, and he really seems to like the other guy too a lot.
Yeah. Scotty B says, watch the NFC title game again. Look at the expression on Brock's face after the injury. Stone cold. That dude is just a leader. I'll say the same thing. Look at Trey Lance, the expression and the demeanor he had on the field when he got his ankle just crushed. You know, he wasn't like he was losing his mind. He stayed composed. I think both these guys are incredibly courageous. We were talking to Bobby T today, and Lindsay Polaris asked the question, what is the upside potential of Jordan Mason? And guess what word Bobby T used?
Star, All-Pro, star, All-Pro, star.
Limitless. And that is an incredible word for Jordan Mason. When you think about how big, how strong, how fast, how explosive he is, he reminds me, Vish, of like Marshawn Lynch. He runs upright, kind of like Marshawn, but Marshawn had no fear in his game, and I don't see any real fear in JP Mason's game. And the fact that Bobby T, who doesn't throw, he throws out compliments like manhole covers. I mean, he just doesn't throw out compliments. The fact that he described Jordan Mason as limitless, if you're a 49er fan, that's an exciting quote. I mean, there aren't that many quotes that are going to get me excited. But Bobby T calling Jordan Mason's potential and upside limitless is like, that's a great word. And it makes me kind of, dream on it a little bit and think about it. Like, what could we see with this kid? I mean, he was awesome at the end of the year in that Seattle run where he almost got to the goal line. I think we're going to see the emergence of Jordan Mason this summer. What do you think?
It's a crowded running back room at the moment. I would like to see some movement first to see if Elijah Mitchell gets moved before I start projecting on Jordan Mason, because it's tough to see him displacing Mitchell's role. Because you're not seeing Mason get run. That's what you're saying. Exactly. And so how do I project somebody's upside without them being able to get on the field. And it's not necessarily even because whether they're talented or if they're not. It's because there's a massive logjam at the position, let alone the fact that, there's incentives on the contract of one of the wide receivers. So, he's going to get quite a few carries in there as well. So, yeah.
Super chat from 4Life Niners says, do you think Brock Purdy thinks we're a Super Bowl ready team? If so, would he rush to play? Well, there's no doubt he thinks they're a Super Bowl ready team. But still, I think that he's going to play. Is he going to rush to play? That's a hard one to answer. That's like, so like we're presuming a lot there. To say he would rush to play almost kind of presumes that he's not 100% and that he's just going to go out there and take physical risks with his body because of, prioritizing the present over the future. I don't know that he seems more grounded than that, but come on, man, he's a football player and he wants to play, and I'm sure he wants to get back on the field as soon as possible. What would you say to that question, Vish?
Yeah, I mean, I can give my opinion. I don't think he should rush to play. I think he should make sure that he is 100% fully healthy and comfortable before he steps back on the field. But that's my perspective, because I would never step on an NFL football field, and I would need to feel fully healthy and then some before I stepped on there and faced an oncoming pass rush while standing there tall and confident and making decisions to look to throw the ball down the field. So that's my perspective. Ultimately, this question can only be answered by Brock Purdy. We're not in his head. We don't know we don't know how he feels. We don't know how his elbow feels. We don't know what his threshold for pain is, what being hurt is to him. Being hurt to me could be a nick on my finger. I'm sure nick on the finger doesn't affect Brock Purdy. So,
well, and we all know there's pressure to play, right? I'm sure there's probably pressure to play.
I don't think the Niners have subtly added pressure. If you've noticed, when they say those dates, like when they mention July 28th, that puts pressure on Brock Purdy. Why? Because Larry Krueger, Matt Maiocco, Grant Cohn, David Lombardi, all these different people start asking Brock Purdy at the next presser. John Lynch said July 28th. The media starts running with July 28th. A bunch of fans say, hey, Brock Purdy, you're going to be back July 28th, right? It increases the pressure. And by the way, while we're on the conversation of poise and confidence, has he not handled those questions so fantastically throughout his time hurt this offseason? Every time he says, I understand it. That's a goal. That's amazing. But I'm just taking it day at a time. It doesn't feel like he gets rattled or the pressure. Like, he seems to understand that aspect of it so well. Yeah, his maturity is unbelievable. And yeah, I got to say, I'm a little jealous.
Well, it's funny,
the same age.
The line that Brock has used, it's a copycat league, and Trey has copied this line because they both are using it now. We're going to remain where our feet are. Purdy said that a bunch of times, and in the last go around, I think Trey said it as well. Hey, asked about the future. I'm going to remain where my feet are, which is it's a simple enough statement, but I think it also kind of reveals that lots of people put the cart before the horse and get further down the road with their comments and thoughts, and you get in trouble that way, right? So it's like, stay where your feet are at. In other words, play it day by day, and we'll see. And I think there's probably pressure on all NFL players, to be honest, to play, because it's like every game day is like the playoffs for like the NBA or baseball. And it's like, you're not going to miss the playoffs in the NBA,
right,
if you can walk. And if you're not going to miss a baseball in the baseball, you don't see too many guys sit out playoff games. And in the NFL, every game is a playoff game. So I think there's inherent pressure to play for both guys, for sure. Taylor Broussard says, Jordan Mason reminds me of Thomas Rawls. What? Not sure what happened to his career, but Mason, bigger, faster, stronger version.
You don't remember Baby Beast Mode, Larry?
Hope is that Mason
what he did to Jim O'Neill's defense?
Well, I do remember Thomas Rawls.
Was it Mangenius's defense that he ran all over, or was it Jim O'Neill's defense?
I don't remember that.
It's hard for me to. Okay, so I
do remember Thomas Rawls.
Can see it. I guess I can see it from a run style standpoint, but for me, body type matters a lot when I think about comparisons. And Jordan Mason has that kind of long, lean body for a running back, almost Marion Barber-ish, where he's very tall and upright. And then you have Thomas Rawls, who I remember having more of the Doug Martin, where he's muscled up to the max. His legs were really, really thick, but he was a short, stocky kind of build. That's how I remember it. Am I crazy? Was Thomas Rawls somehow a lot taller than I remember?
No, he was 5'9", 215.
Okay,
and by the way,
so he was that body type.
He went to Flint Northern High School in Flint, Michigan, where his coaches nicknamed him the Train. The Train.
And wasn't Thomas Jones the Train?
Thomas Jones was damn good. You talking about the kid from UVA?
Yeah.
Yeah, Thomas Jones
went to the
was
Super Bowl with the Chicago Bears.
A lot of people felt like Thomas Jones was done, and then remember he had a whole nother career after that.
I think he was the first. I think he was the first back taken in the draft that Sean Alexander was picked out of Alabama.
Right, and then was considered a bust.
Yeah,
and then had a whole nother career.
Right.
You know, to me, he's kind of like Thomas Jones was kind of more like a Garrison Hurst. He was like a blue chipper.
Is it because he wore 20?
Well, I was just saying because I'm thinking of Garrison Hurst as a blue chip back who went super high and then left wherever he was.
That's Marshawn Lynch to me. That's
went
Marshawn
on to
Lynch.
the ninth. Yeah,
career.
Marshawn
got stuck in that depth chart because they picked C.J. Spiller. Then what did they pick him, 8th or 9th? And then he goes to Seattle, and he's one of the great running backs of the 2010s.
Look at this. We got the coach in the house. The coach. I love your segments with Grant, Coach. Love them. Absolutely love them.
He's killing it.
Coach, let me just pay you this compliment. Personnel, buddy. You do. I flipped on a couple of those Grant streams with you and Grant going back and forth. Dude, your personnel. Me and you got to get together and talk players one day because, Coach, your personnel, man. I forget who you were talking about one day, but it was long. It was an undrafted Niner free agent, and your detail on this prospect was lengthy. By the way, I was at a gas station today at the Shell station right by Levi's, and the guy comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, man, I love you." And I said, "Thanks, bro. I appreciate it." He's like, "You're always on with Grant." And I'm like, now it's like I don't have a name. I'm like, "Thanks, man. Larry Krueger, nice to meet you." He's like, "Yeah. I always catch you with Grant."
On with Grant.
You're on with Grant. I told you I was at Safeway a few weeks ago, and a couple guys came up to me. Guy goes, "Hey, man, Grant Cohn." And I go, No, Larry Krueger. He's like, "Yeah, but you're always on with Grant Cohn." Made me laugh. Coach says, "Okay, let's do it your way, Larry. Brock gets the start week 1, and he starts struggling. Do we ride with Brock until the wheels fall off? How long is that leash?" That's a good question. Does the 8 games played afford him a full season no matter what? No.
I don't think so either.
No. It affords him all 4 quarters of the opener, but it doesn't afford him 8 games. No. I would say, well, it really kind of depends. Why is he struggling? Is he struggling because he can't, his arm strength is noticeably lesser? Or is he struggling because the 49ers fall behind because their defense is getting ripped and here comes TJ Watt and it's jailbreak because they're down, they lose connection on the scoreboard and McKivitz is getting roasted by TJ Watt and then living in the backfield. And you got to remember this, the Steelers are like 8-1, Coach, in the last 9 week 1 games at Heinz Field. So they're going to roll into that game with all the momentum.
They won last year on the road at Cincinnati, went in there and beat Cincinnati, sacked Joe Burrow 7 times. And then the year before that, they went into Buffalo when I think Buffalo was a top 3 favorite preseason to win the Super Bowl. And they went into Buffalo with Ben Roethlisberger a few months removed from Tommy John and beat him. So
Tomlin's a great coach and he gets his team ready to play. If you beat the Steelers, it's because you're the better team. They don't typically beat themselves.
They did against the Niners.
They have. I'm not saying they never have, but you know what I'm saying? I think Tomlin has his guys. I think Tomlin's Steelers are kind of like Shanahan's Niners from the standpoint of I hardly ever watch them where at the end of the game, I'm like, the Niners no-showed or the Steelers
competed.
Emotionally no-showed.
Yeah.
Steelers don't, Niners don't. These teams show.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, right? That 2019 Steelers team was not good at all. And they came into Levi's against a Niners team that was still finding its feet, but coming off the confidence of just hammering Cincinnati in week 2. And they gave them an absolute dogfight with Mason Rudolph, who only Pittsburgh likes for whatever reason because he's one of the worst quarterbacks that's employed by the NFL. But they keep employing him for whatever reason. And so, yeah, they're really, really good. I do think.
How would you answer this one, though?
Larry,
yeah, it's a good question because it's a scenario that we have not painted yet.
I think it comes down to results, and here's why. And I'm going to present a similar scenario that we saw, but there is a distinction, and I'm going to mention the distinction as well to the two scenarios. If you remember in 2019, Jimmy Garoppolo had that god-awful camp when he returned from his ACL injury, right? The 5 straight pick practice. The second preseason game against Denver on Monday Night Football was one of the worst preseason games you'll ever see. That was horrible. And he had a rough camp and he did not look very good. And Mike Silver and Chris Mortensen both reported separately at different times during that offseason that Nick Mullins was a guy that, Shanahan preferred how he ran his offense versus Garoppolo, and that there would be a quick trigger on Garoppolo if he played poorly. The funny part is to open that season, the first 8 games of that season when the 49ers started 8-0, Garoppolo did actually play poorly. He was not good in the first 8 games of that season. Frankly, he was bad, and they were winning in spite of him a lot of those games. And they did win in spite of him, and the Niners didn't have a quick trigger with him. And
what season are you talking about?
This is 2019, the start of 2019, right?
The Super Bowl year.
Yeah. He played well, very well in the second half of the season. I'll give that to him. He played horrible in the first half of that season, and they didn't have a quick trigger with him. Now, it is a little bit different replacing Jimmy Garoppolo 2 years removed after you made him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and you're replacing him with Nick Mullins, who's an undrafted free agent, right? There is political dynamics with that aren't necessarily as much in play because Brock Purdy at the end of the day is a 7th-round, second-year quarterback. None of these guys are making that much more money than the other, where politics might give them an advantageous role. But I do think if the Niners are winning, even if the quarterback is playing poorly and let's say it's Trey Lance. Let's say the Niners start 6-0 and Trey Lance is playing poorly. I think they would let it ride with Trey Lance. Now, if they go on a 2-game slide, I think the trigger would be quick, in that situation. Or if it's Brock Purdy and he's playing terribly, but they win 6 in a row, start 6-0, I think they would let it ride with him, but be aware that he's playing poorly. Same thing with Sam Darnold, And then,
so you're basically saying the results of the game determine everything.
Yeah.
So you could play poorly in a loss.
Exactly.
But if you play poorly and you win, you get another opportunity. You could play well in a win and keep your job. You can play poorly in a win and keep your job. But if you lose, that's what you're saying. That's when you start to.
I think so.
I would say this. I would say that it really depends on if they win or lose. I do agree. If you win, you could always chalk it up to something. But if you inherently see a lesser prospect, like let's say he can't make the deep out throw and you're seeing a guy that doesn't look the same, I think he's got 2-game leash.
You're going in a different direction, right? You're going to him being physically not fully back. And that I think would then be a responsibility on the 49ers to protect him from himself and get him off the field in that case. But I think we're just thinking that he comes back, he's the same exact guy, and he plays poorly, right? In that case, I think he can get away with playing poorly as long as the Niners are winning because they'll keep giving him opportunities to figure it out the same way they did for Garoppolo in 2019. But if they start 0-4, right, Larry, and he's playing horrible, Trey Lance will be in for sure, or Sam Darnold.
So you're saying 4 games?
Not 4 games. I'm just giving a random.
No, I know, but I wasn't sure. Let's just say he plays. Let's say Brock starts week 1, plays poorly, and they lose. I think Brock starts week 2.
Yeah, 100%.
If they play poorly and lose, that's who they play in week 2, Giants?
By the way, I think that's the case for whomever starts week 1. So if Trey Lance starts week 1, he plays poorly and loses, I think he will start week 2.
I
If
agree.
Sam Darnold starts week 1, he plays poorly and loses, I think he will also start week 2. I think that applies
I
for all
agree.
3. Yeah.
I think that the speed of the league as far as making moves. The one thing with coaches, there's more coach. It's like we need more than the information you gave, because we also don't know in this scenario how did Trey and Sam play in the preseason.
Right.
And I think that matters, because if those guys, let's say Brock is the starter week 1, and those guys in the preseason were a circus, I think he gets a month. If
Oh,
Brock,
okay. So you're saying it's going to be dictated more on how strongly they feel about whichever quarterbacks are behind the guy that ends up starting.
let's say we watch the preseason and Brock and Trey and Darnold all ball out, Brock's still your week 1 starter. If he loses week 1 and plays poorly, I think he probably starts the second game. But I think it ends right there. That's where if he plays poorly in week 2 and loses, and Trey and Sam both had a great preseason, I think in week 3 they would make up some form of an excuse and go to one of the other 2 guys.
I could see that. I could see that as well. But I could also see the scenario where they give him 4, 5, 6 games, even if he's playing poorly. As long as they don't start like 0-6, if they're 3-3, I could still see the scenario where they give that to him. And by the way, I could see that again for all 3 of these quarterbacks. Like I could see all 3 of them having a quick trigger if they start week 1, and I could see all 3 of them be given a long rope to start. It's really circumstantial, really. Now that you mention it, right? It just depends on how things end up playing out throughout the entirety of this camp and where he is physically. That's going to because I think what you said is right on. It all depends on how the other guys are playing for them to have that trigger and have the confidence to get off of it.
And also think about it this way. If those 2 other quarterbacks play really well in the preseason, there'll be more public pressure to play them.
Right, exactly.
And that will also factor into this equation. So that would be how I would answer that. But it's the one thing that from talking to Shanahan through the years that I get a sense of is that, especially early in the year, lots of head coaches are really reticent about making changes at quarterback, because they know if you overreact to a loss and pull the quarterback and then you lose again,
you kind of kill your season because you can't go back to him.
Yeah, it's and you don't want to burn through all your quarterbacks in the first month and have nobody, feel like it's also becomes a very what's the word? I mean, kind of an unsettled room.
Yeah.
If you're just nobody knows who the leader is because everybody's one loss away from losing their job.
And that's why I hate quarterback competitions, because I think they all end up in the scenario that you described. I think it always ends up that for that team. But I also think Shanahan has shown in his time that he's very cognizant of that particular dynamic, right? Like we've known he wanted to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo for how long? But he continued that dynamic because he understood that the team believed in Jimmy Garoppolo and they needed that. So I do think, Shanahan is all over that, like you mentioned as well.
Couple more minutes. We're not going long today. We got NBA Finals Game 1 coming up. Vish has got a big night in Chi-Town as well.
Oh, right.
Caesar says Brock Purdy has about 8 games of tape now. How do you think defenses will attack him if he comes back? Well, that's a great question.
I think the Dallas first half is a great example of how defenses can attack him. I think the issue is
for those who missed that game, Vish, talk about what you're referencing there.
Really, I mean, Dallas has great speed on the edges, so they were able to chase him around the corner and force him to run out to his left and force him to run out of the pocket earlier than he could. He wants to, and really make, tight window throws down the field. And I do think that, early in that Dallas game, he got outside of the pocket more than he needed to, and he was doing that a little bit more too much. And I thought the second half of the Dallas game is kind of a great example of why I think that he's in a very, very nice spot, even if teams do adjust for him, because he's in an offense that the scheme is so good, the talent is so good, that if he can just play within himself the way he played in the second half against Dallas, get the ball out when the back foot hits the ground, it's a freaking Ferrari, man. They're all so good. Like Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey, they're so good. The line is pretty good. They run the ball so well. The scheme is so good that even when you're adjusting and doing all these things to stop him, if he just plays efficient football and manages the game and manages the offense, he's going to have a lot of stats. And so that's where, like, I do think there is a way to stop him and go at him, but I don't know if teams can necessarily completely implement that plan because the talent surrounding him makes it way too difficult to be able to stop Brock Purdy because the offense itself is so good, the scheme is so good, and all of that. And so really all he has to do is just do his job and be poised enough to make the correct decision and get the ball out on time. Easier said than done, but when he's able to do that, it's impossible to stop this offense.
I kind of thought the way Miami went at him in the first game that he ever played is the way I would go at him, which is just bring the freaking house and bring him from all different directions and just
he doesn't get rattled by it, though.
No, he's not rattled by it, but make him deal with constant pressure coming from all angles. Never let him get real comfortable because I think the alternative, I don't know that works, but I know the alternative.
You know what I would like in an ideal world, Larry? I would like to have 2 6'8" defensive tackles rushing up the middle, getting in his face with 2 ends, not getting too far up the field where he can escape out the edge. So now you're just collapsing within the pocket. So you're making him feel small within the pocket because there's not a lot of space. You're taking that space away from him. And then I just play tight man coverage, bump and run on the outside and make him have to step in and make big boy throws down the field outside the numbers. Now, the thing is, if you do that with the Niners, when you between Ayuk, Kittle, Debo, and especially Christian McCaffrey, they'll eat you up, and Juwan Jennings in man coverage. So it's not the easiest thing to do. And I think that's really the biggest thing. I think theoretically there's a lot of different things that you could do perhaps to stop Brock Purdy, but it's not this stopping this offense is less about game planning and stopping the quarterback. And it's more about stopping how good this system is and how good those weapons are, because they're all top notch.
I'd go at him with corner blitzes because to me, what is Brock Purdy's real advantage? His advantage is that he's a lot quicker than you anticipate, and he has quickness to evade defensive tackles and defensive ends. If you send corner blitzes, and then he's going to try to throw in behind you, but your corners, I think, can get home. We've already seen him show some flaws where he tries to escape out the back door. That is not necessarily the way you want it. So I think if you can pressure him with smaller, faster guys that he can't run away from, then he's got to use his arm to beat the blitz and not his legs.
But
so
he did use his arm to beat the blitz against the Miami Dolphins, though. He went hot against cover zero like 5 times in that game.
I know. And then some of them were blind. I mean, truly blind, where he's staring it down and he just threw the ball.
That's still the best game he played, by the way. In those 8, the Miami game was the one that was like, wow, this is a 7th round.
Well, I would say the best game he played was the first Seattle playoff game. I thought the first Seattle. You don't think so? He threw for 332. He accounted for 5 touchdowns.
I think the first Seattle playoff game, if he played well in the first half, he could have thrown for 709 touchdowns.
Or was it 4 touchdowns? It might have been 4 touchdowns.
He could have thrown for 709 touchdowns. They had open receivers on every play. It was,
For Life Niners says, love for you both. Straight, honest answer. Oh, look at that. Just
love
there
for
we go.
You too, For Life Niner.
There we go. Frankie HB. Brock coming back to start game 1 after a limited offseason and serious injury would be wild. It'll be bumpy, especially week 1. There's film on Brock Purdy now. I mean, you know what? There were people that said that after the Miami game. I remember that the Tampa game was like, hey, it's going to be a totally different deal. Tampa's got a pretty good defense, and now everybody's got to look at Brock. Well, the Niners won 35-7, and I think they scored on like 4 straight possessions to start the game. The coach. So ultimately, Brock, Trey, Sam are as good as the record. Ergo, none of them will ever be a true starter. A short leash and built-in plausible deniability only helps coaches keep jobs and players get paid. We're kicking the can. I mean, I hear you. He's
really smart. He's really smart because this is my exact opinion of the quarterback room. I've told you this many times, both on and off record, that I feel like this is what we're trending towards with how it's set up. I think there is a more optimistic view, which you have, which is that, 2 out of those 3 guys, in your opinion. I think the Niners have the optimistic view that all 3 guys are starters and that this situation is going to help them find out that they can go 1 for 3 with these guys. And then I think you have a little less optimistic view, but a similarly optimistic view that you love the upside of both Trey and Brock. So you think you got 2 guys that are for sure going to be starters, and we're going to find that out this year. And then you have me, who's like, I think all 3 of these guys can be starters, but I don't think the Niners are necessarily building the scenario to give any of these 3 guys the best look at success. And I don't like this quarterback competition thing they've created because I don't think it works.
Well, I mean, you don't think what works? You don't think it? I mean, all the players.
I don't think this splitting reps, creating a perception where this player thinks this guy played better in this practice. The media's charting. This guy was 10 for 12 today. This guy was 9 for 13. This entire conversation, I think it's tired. I think it allows people to pick sides. I think it doesn't build unity. I do think there's something to a team coming behind a quarterback, and I think that's something that's very powerful that the Niners have had with Jimmy Garoppolo. Not that Jimmy Garoppolo was a great quarterback. I just think that there was a powerful emotion in how the Niners played for him. And I think doing this is going to have a difference of opinion. And I think that it can cause some issues, because what happens if Trey wins this job, but some people think Darnold won this job, and Purdy isn't exactly ready, and then Trey plays and he doesn't play so good, so now some people think Darnold should play, but Darnold's really not the guy anyway, so you put Darnold in. He's no better than Trey, so you really could have never pulled Trey in the first place, but you already pulled Trey and killed his confidence and went to Darnold, and now Purdy's back, and you need Purdy to come save your season. It's crazy. I don't like it. I don't like it.
What's the alternative?
It's not. I think that's why I don't necessarily criticize it as much, because I understand the situation. I think this is what they had to do. In fact, I would have taken it a step further when I looked at what they had to do, and I wouldn't even have gone and brought somebody like Darnold, because I would have just said, let's find out between Trey and Brock. There was something about Trey that made us take him 3rd overall, right? We're going to find that out about him this offseason. And then when Brock's healthy, we loved what he did last year so much. We'll do that. Like, I get it. Like, I get it. Larry, I get it based on the investment. I get what they're doing, why they're doing it, why they have to do it. From a logical standpoint, it makes sense. I just don't like the direction of it just based on past precedents on how it's worked in the NFL. I mean, Larry, what's the team? What's the team that we would put top 5 in the Super Bowl conversation that we're talking quarterback competition or controversy?
Oh, what team that would be in the top 5 conversation would have a
in any time in NFL history that we're talking about this way?
Maybe your team, Chicago. Maybe Bears with Tom Zach and Harbaugh and
even Grossman and Orton wasn't even a quarterback controversy. And Orton was playing as a rookie, and they won a few games, and Grossman came back and took his job. And then
here's the
Super Bowl.
It's funny. I agree with you. It's not like an ideal situation, but like, if you don't know if you have a franchise quarterback or not, what is the best approach? I like the Niners approach, which is get 4 guys that you think you've got some belief in and let them compete, let them fight it out, because what's the alternative? I don't want to. The one thing is, it would be nice if there was like a pecking order and there was no debate. But we're not there. Like, Brock hasn't ascended to that point. Trey's got massive upside, but he hasn't gotten there yet. Darnold, you can say there were high expectations for him coming out of SC. He hasn't become that guy. But then you look at the way the year ended, where you're going to your 5th quarterback. I mean, you lost because you ran out of quarterbacks. It's like, I don't know about you, but I turned off that TV set saying this can't freaking happen again. Sure. And the only way to make sure that doesn't happen again is to have multiple guys that can do it. But if you have multiple guys who can do it, then you don't necessarily have, then you always have this
No,
debate.
sure, absolutely. And you explained why, like, logically, I get what they did and how they did it and why they did it, right? Like, I can follow that flow. That's why I'm not sitting here just like,
bashing the
this isn't
Niners.
going to work, right? Because I don't know. But if you look at, hey, precedent in going this route with the quarterback position, it doesn't really work.
We're
talking about 3 guys that are, none of them are established. Really?
There's no precedent for it.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Niners go on this year, there's no precedent for it. If they go on and win a championship, there's no precedent for this.
If they go on and win a championship, they are going to make people completely rethink everything with the quarterback position, how it's viewed, how they pay the quarterback. If the 49ers win the Super Bowl, all of that's going to be rethought, right? Because they did the opposite of what conventional wisdom tells us in the NFL. Conventional wisdom says you get your quarterback, you build your around your quarterback, and that's your team, right?
Yeah.
The Niners did everything but get the quarterback.
They built a team and then went and got the quarterback.
And then they went and got the quarterback, right?
Well, you know what? You know the irony. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You know what the irony is I was just going to say that the Niners built a team that was so damn talented that they had to go get a rookie quarterback to be able to keep their team. Otherwise, it was bye-bye Ayuk and bye-bye this guy and that guy. They said, you know what? We love all these guys. We want to keep them. How do we do it? Oh, we can only do it by getting a rookie quarterback. That's why I kind of feel like I feel bad for Trey, because I feel like, and maybe Brock too, but I just feel that the 49ers weren't committed to Trey. How many times do you draft a quarterback in the top 5 and you're not really committed to that player? What they were truly committed to was having a quarterback on a rookie deal so they could afford to keep Debo and Ayuk and Bosa and Warner and Greenlaw. And, don't you think?
I think originally, no, but I think that changed when they saw how much of a chance they had last year with Jimmy and how much they had a chance this year with Brock. Like, originally, they tried at Stafford, they tried at Watson. Kyle kept saying before the draft, we need a starting quarterback, right? Like, I do think the outlook was that, hey, Jimmy's not good enough to win a Super Bowl. But I think when they saw how close they were in 2021 with Jimmy, and then how close they were last year in 2022 with a combination of Trey, Brock, and Jimmy, I do think that kind of screwed this idea of, well, we don't necessarily need to wait and find out on Trey and his potential, because we got Brock here. He's young. He's equally as cheap. He's even cheaper. So we don't need to play this waiting game because he solves all of our short-term issues.
He's like the perfect guy in that he's got the experience. Kyle hasn't proven he can develop a young quarterback, but guess what? Brock doesn't really need development, and you still got him on his rookie deal, and you've got him for more years on that rookie deal. So it's like checks all these boxes. Let's finish with this. The coach has got two good ones here. He says, I'm 100% aligned with Vish. It's divisive and a low-hanging fruit argument. The real conversation should be whether Kyle is going to do his job, but they fooled us into the quarterback beauty pageant. It's BS. That's interesting perspective. Coach, we got to stream at some point.
Yeah, I know. This is too good. This is like,
well, this one is, we could do it in the comment. We could seriously do a whole show on this comment.
Right.
I mean, we really could. I'm not as down on Kyle as others, but I don't think Kyle is infallible.
I think you're hiding a little bit. I think I'm with you. I'm obviously a very pro Kyle Shanahan person. That's often the fan in me talking, but I think he's a phenomenal coach. But I do think this beauty pageant BS, as coach describes it, is a way to excuse them from us not looking and asking questions about why Trey Lance is where he is 2 years into this entire plan that they were supposed to allegedly have with him after trading the sun and the moon to take him 3rd overall, right?
I kind of feel like Kyle Shanahan called his own bluff, Vish, because Kyle's a great play caller, great play deviser, schemer, sequencer, but he's got no track record necessarily of developing a quarterback from college raw prospect to Pro Bowl, awesome quarterback. Matt Ryan was much better in year 2 than year 1, but I don't really see Kyle as developing Matt Ryan as much as giving Matt Ryan its awesome offense with all these tools
I
that
mean,
set records.
Matt Ryan was making multiple Pro Bowls with Dirk Cutter. He was a top 10 quarterback in the NFL before Shanahan got there. Now, Shanahan made him an MVP, so he took him up a tier, right? Matt Ryan went from 6 to 10 to 1 through 5 in the league, but yeah.
But I mean, the one thing about Kyle is the one thing that makes me think that maybe Kyle did want Mac Jones is that Mac Jones was another quarterback that didn't necessarily need development. He was just a healthier version of Jimmy. And it's possible that Kyle looked at that and said, hey, I'll take that. I'll take a healthier version of Jimmy who doesn't need development and is on a rookie contract that we can keep the rest of this roster together. So to me, it's not totally crazy that they could have wanted Mac Jones, even though Kyle says that's not the case.
I think they could have wanted Mac Jones too, but they took Trey Lance, right? And we can get into all of that, but they took Trey Lance. That's who they put all of their resources to. That's who they wanted to, elevate all of that. That's who they took. I do think, it is a little bit. The coach is right. Like a lot of this competition, a lot of it's created an impression of something else where, when you trade that much up for a player, usually that player becomes the face of your franchise. And in a lot of ways, the Niners have played this game of putting Trey Lance under that spotlight, but also not putting him under that spotlight. And the back-to-back NFC Championship games have kind of removed the spotlight of the fact that they invested so much in a quarterback, and it feels like they've kind of paused that project halfway, or instead of investing 100% of resources into that project, they're now only investing 50% of resources into that project and having another hedge project on the side. And I know a lot of people say, well, they tried to do that for him last offseason, but they didn't end up doing that fully, right? Because they did bring Jimmy back at the end of it. And I was talking to our good friend Jesse Naylor yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about this.
Did you call him me?
I did call him Larry by accident. I did.
The look on his face was not. He was not happy.
Oh, really?
No, I'm just joking.
Well, I mean, I guess if I was a Jesse, would I want to be called Larry? Probably not.
He's a much younger, better-looking guy. He's like, come on, man. I don't know about that.
Right. I'm not that old yet. No offense, Krug. You're still looking quite young.
Go ahead, Fish. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no, what I was saying basically was that at the time was that like it's very complicated when you look at, well, were they going to fully do that for him last year? Because sometimes I do wonder this, Krug, right? Because I think the outlook that you, me, Jesse, we have this outlook, right? That if Trey had played, week 1 was going to be the worst of what he was going to look like last year, right? We were expecting a gradual growth whereby week 10, week 11, week 12, he might be a completely different quarterback from week.
I'm convinced he would have been better.
Sure, but that was our expectation, right? But let's pretend like week 1 maybe was the normal. Like that's what he was going to be. Let's say week 2 was kind of ugly. Let's say he had the same exact week 3 Jimmy Garoppolo had. How long do you think the leash would have been there with him? I mean, there was that 16-player meeting that Shanahan and Lynch had. That meeting was leaked to Jay Glazer. Shanahan and Lynch weren't the ones who probably called up Jay Glazer to tell him about the meeting they called in all their players for. One of the players leaked that to Jay Glazer, right? There was the palpable tension in the locker room after week 1. That was a quote because they lost. There was the quote right after Trey Lance got hurt where to Mike Silver, I'm not going to say we're a better team, but you can say we're a better team. With all of this existing, I don't know how long the leash would have been there for Trey Lance even last year.
Great point. It's a great point.
Know.
I think it would have been short, and I think it would have been short because of the players and the fact that the Niners were a Super Bowl contender and Jimmy was sitting right there. I think it was going to be short. The coaches, thank you, at least admit that what we are doing has never been done. There's no doubt. It's totally unprecedented. And these 2 last ones, we got this one from J49. It says, great show, gents. Please only wear Niner colors when doing the show. We are not Rams fans here. Okay, very good. And then Jared says, Coach and Krug. It has a ring. Has a ring to
let's
it.
Throw Vish in here. Coach Krug and Vish.
Yes, we can do that. We can make that happen.
We can.
Vish, thank you, man. I did talk the one last thought I had I know we're going to run here, But Daniel Bullocks, the DB coach, had a great conversation with him. I'm going to post it on Twitter or on YouTube in a little bit. And I asked him about Jair Brown. And one of the things that came up, and there was two really interesting comments, both from Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk said, "I'm getting ready to take off," which was like, wow. If Brandon Ayuk really gets to another level, that's going to be awesome for the Niners. But the other one was that Jair Brown is now Brandon Ayuk's locker mate. And according to Ayuk, Jair Brown's got 4 picks and almost could have had a 5th. And I asked Daniel Bullocks about it, and he's like, well, I don't know about that if he's got 4 or 5, but you know what? He's got undeniable ball skills. He had 10 picks last year at Penn State. He had 10 picks the year before. Will Jair Brown, any chance in your mind, beat out Talanoa Hufanga Tayshaun Gibson and start at free safety opposite Talanoa Hufanga week 1 against the Steelers? Or do you think it's Gibson's job and really nothing that is done in the preseason will affect, Gibson starting at free?
I think you and I had this conversation just last week.
We did?
And I think,
I apologize for duplicating.
No, absolutely not, because I think the answer is the exact same even after finding out that 5-pick thing about him this week, right? Because I think you and
That's a lot of picks, though. That's a lot of picks.
Absolutely. But I viewed him as a day 1 starter in the draft. Like, I legitimately look at him as a day 1 starter at safety. And I think in the case that he has to, he can 100% start day 1 for the 49ers at safety, right? I think barring a catastrophic camp/injury for Tayshaun Gibson, combined with Jair Brown having the kind of camp where you already feel like, hey, he's a first-team All-Pro safety. He's rookie year Derwin James, week 1, like right away. I think they would probably just stick to having Gibson play back there because he's the steady veteran, and have Brown play a lot of snaps all over because he's versatile enough to line up in the slot. He can blitz. He can do everything. And I think that would likely be the case where he would play a lot of snaps and he would be a key contributor to the defense, maybe not start and do that particular role unless, it just looks like in camp where we just can't keep this guy off the field. He's freaking All-Pro first-team safety already. Like, Tayshaun Gibson, sorry, you can't play over this guy. Or Gibson is just completely not the same player that he was.
I think there's a chance that Gibson loses the job to Brown in the preseason.
Okay.
I think Brown might be that special. That's an awful lot of interceptions. Okay. But, Gibson himself has 34. Right. He's got a ton.
That's a lot for a career, man.
That is a lot. That's a lot. Jaquaski Tartt's sitting there going, damn, that's a lot.
Hey, why you got to hate on my man Kwaski there? Come on.
All right, on the way out the door, who do you got in the series? Nuggets or Heat?
Denver. I'll continue to pick against Miami, man.
Denver in how many?
Give me Denver in 6. Jimmy will get them 2.
Ooh.
They'll close it out in Miami, South Beach. Nikola Jokic has a triple-double. I don't know. I'm just talking now, but sure, I'll go with that.
I'm gonna. You know what? I'm gonna go Heat. I like the Heat. I like Eric Spoelstra, and I like the Heat. I think the Heat's got a good vibe
what are we
going.
Gonna talk about with basketball? Like, I know I'm a Pistons fan, and the 04 Pistons could have skewed this, but that Pistons team went to 5 straight Eastern Conference Finals. They were a dominant team in the Eastern Conference. Well, I guess they've been to 4 Eastern Conference Finals out of 5 or whatever, Miami 2. But the 8 seed without Tyler Hero, like, what would basketball conversation turn into if Jimmy Butler with Caleb Martin and Gabe Clipsant, Gabe Clipsant riding shotgun with him, win an NBA championship? Like, what does that do? Is that not the greatest ring of all time?
I mean, look at all the undrafted players that Miami has.
Right.
I just think that Miami is so well coached. I think Denver. Okay, let me ask you this. Last question on the way out the door. Who would you rather have what Miami has, which is like momentum having just won, but no rest? Or would you rather have what Denver has, which is tremendous amounts of rest, but maybe a little rust?
I'd rather be Denver.
You'd rather be Denver with the rest.
Top to bottom, the best team in the NFL. I have the best player in the series. He's having an all-time playoffs that nobody's talking about. I mean, isn't he averaging a triple-double right now in the playoffs? And we're well rested. And Miami's played 2 long series, right? The Knicks series went 6. I guess that wasn't a long series. They made it a little bit longer, but it went 6. And then the Boston series went 7, yeah. It was a grueling series, very physical series.
Maybe the worst series ever from a fan's perspective. You're the favorite. You fall into an 0-3 hole only to force game 7 on your home floor, and then you get kicked in the gut in game 7.
That's the beauty. That's the beauty of Jason Tatum. He's got a Jameis Winston quality to keep both teams simultaneously in a series at all times.
Boston deserved it, man. They settled for way too many threes at the beginning of that series.
Let me ask you
beginning
this
of that game 7, I should say.
Well, let me ask you this while we're on the topic before we go. What do you think is Boston's biggest problem?
That Jason Tatum, at the end of the day, is too obsessed with being his favorite player, Kobe Bryant, and not the player that he is, which is a 6'10" mismatch, skill mismatch. He likes to handle. They took too many threes. Too many guys where there's like questionable pecking order. Like the best teams know coming out of a huddle, who's my first option, who's my second option. When the Spurs came out of a huddle, it's Tim Duncan was the first option. It's Manu Ginobili was the second option. And somebody else was the third option. When the Warriors come out of the huddle, it's Steph Curry's the first option. Klay Thompson's the second option. Andrew Wiggins is the third option. When you see Boston come out of the huddle, who's the first option? Sometimes it's Marcus Smart. Sometimes it's Jaylen Brown. Sometimes it's Jason Tatum. I think they don't have enough. I don't think Tatum is playing the game. Like he should have camped out in the lane against the Warriors. They would have beaten the Warriors. Instead, he got too Kobe-like. I want to pound the dribble between my legs, top of the circle. And you're not Kobe. You aren't Kobe. You're not Kobe. Don't try to be Kobe.
And I think Boston does have its issues. Like I do think the Jaylen Brown issues, they're definitely like valid, and he deserves the criticism he's getting. But honestly, I'm 100% with you. I don't know why it's not talked about by the national media as much. The issue with the Boston Celtics is that Jason Tatum is not good enough to be the best player on a championship team because he's just not consistent enough. For every 50-point game 7 he has a game 7 like the game 7 he had last week. Is he clutch? Is he not clutch? I don't know. Can someone answer that question? Because he has clutch performances, but he also has severely unclutch performances. And the guy has 2 games every series where his worst games, you can't win with them. And it's like a bad game for Jokic means his shot's not falling, but he gave you 15 assists. A bad game for Tatum means his shot's not falling and he turned the ball over 8 times. I think that's their biggest problem. Boston's the deepest team in the NBA. I feel like you put, any other top 10 player on Boston. Like if we put Nikola Jokic on Boston, top to bottom, do we not think they win the NBA title? We put Luka on Boston. We put Steph on Boston. Put AD, maybe not AD, but like
I think it doesn't help too when you have a young team and a young head coach.
Yeah,
it would be nice if one of them either you had a veteran team and a young coach, or a young team and a veteran coach. I think they got a good coach, but he's young. Vish, we'll let you go on that, my friend. Right. Have a great one. Tuesday night at your place.
Tuesday night, let's do it. Picking a pickle. When were you back on picking a pickle? Thursday?
Yeah, probably next Thursday.
All right.
Have a great weekend. We'll see you Tuesday at your spot.
Awesome. Thanks. See you.
There you go. The great Vish Kumaran. All right. Vish is the man. Coach, loved your supers, and I gotta be, even if you didn't pay me a nickel, I'll pay you this respect. When you're on with Grant, the last 3, one, I didn't know who you were, and the last 3 I started watching. I watched from start to finish. So, Coach, I don't know how we'll get a hold of you, but we need to get you on the Krueger Show. I like your personnel evaluation. Something tells me, Coach, that we could do a personnel deep dive and bore everybody to death forever. I look forward to it. No, but seriously, as somebody who loves talking players, undrafted players, you know what it was? It was the conversation that you had with Grant about Laburn, the Florida State transfer. Drama says, Larry's stealing Grant's guests. Yes, I'm shopping for guests, said Grant Cohn, or us. I just talked to Grant today, by the way. He'll be stopping by Saturday. Normally, Grant and I go on his channel on Mondays, but we got so busy this week, and then the OTAs came. We said, oh, let's do it after the OTAs. But I talked to him today. He said, how about Saturday? So look for a Saturday Krug Grant stream. Coach says, yeah, we can totally geek out. Exactly. Oh, you want to talk Kalen Laburn? I'll match your Kalen Laburn with a Ronald A. Watt. Let's talk 40 times. Good stuff. All right. I'm going to go watch NBA basketball. I'm doing a post game tonight. I haven't done with my Warrior crew. Frank Red's going to be in the house tonight. Danny's going to be in the house tonight. Ned Coletti actually wants to stop by, and he sent me a note today saying, man, I got some thoughts on Bob Myers and the job that he did with the Warriors, and I'd like to talk a little bit about being a GM and the unique position that is. So join us after Nuggets Heat Game 1, right around 8:30 tonight, and we'll be doing a live stream tonight after the game, and we'll talk, a little bit about the Warriors ducking out, a little bit about Myers moving on and where the Warriors go, a little bit on the Giants, I'm sure, because Danny and Ned will be in the house. A lot on the NBA Finals Game 1, and that's all coming up tonight at 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. So check that out later tonight on the Krug Show. Let's thank our sponsors. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open in Corte Madera. They're open in Corte Madera 7 days a week, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. They're open in Emeryville Wednesday through Sunday. Get the brisket, man. The brisket chili, amazing. Little Pig and a Pickle.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. How can you go to church if you don't believe in God? And along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. It wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, that life is good.
headed down the home stretch on the Krug Show. Thanks to Vish Kumar and thanks to all of you. Thanks for checking out the Krug Show. Great conversation I had today with the great Bill Duffy, the NBA super agent. He's got a bunch of guys, including Grady Dick and a bunch of guys for the draft. The Santa Clara kid, who's a combo guard. So talk to Bill about having some of his guys on the show before the NBA draft. So we're going to do that. I'm looking forward to that. We'll see that coming across on the Krug Show in the next couple of weeks, talking NBA draft and a little look ahead to what the Warriors may do and what, Bill's clients think of the lead up to the NBA draft. Tomorrow on the Krug Show, we have a busy day. 10 a.m. Brad Graham's going to be in the house. That'll be cool. I haven't talked to Brad since the draft. Brad loves to crunch personnel, just like the coach. So 10 a.m. Me and Brad Graham chopping it up, talking personnel. Jack Hammer, I believe, is going to join us tomorrow. There's a chance David Lombardi joins us tomorrow. So it's going to be a big Friday. Grant stops by on Saturday. Looking forward to that. We'll chop it up and talk OTAs. And check out the channel. My kid put up a bunch of videos today from the coaching sessions. I had a chance to talk to a number of the 49er assistant coaches. So that stuff's going to be up there later today. And join us in the post game tonight after Nuggets Heat game 1 for a little NBA Finals post game. Until tomorrow or until later on tonight, I'm Larry Krueger. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle.